What was like easy about like executing lunch and coaching lunch, and what was hard about it? So this is so we can learn for when we're coaching our teachers. Go ahead, Emily, start us off.
It was hard for me not to want a model with like the book I'm reading is X, and here's how you can do it. Like getting into a very clear model, and Heather and Robert really pushed me to put that on. I felt like it needed to happen. Like have a student model with their book was way more powerful when I did.
Awesome.
I think the coaching of it was hard because I was so it's like, oh, where is this going? And so like knowing when to stop or coach it, I think was something that I'm gonna need some more help at.
Yeah, it's hard when something's so short to know when to jump in and interrupt.
Yeah.
I think this would be a good example of like something that we would have done exactly like we did it here in like our check-in with our teacher, and then gone in knowing exactly what to look for, because it helps, especially someone like me, to have a sort of representation of what the excellence looks like, or at least what the teacher is trying to get at with the live book.
Which this could be something maybe, Rach, you could add it to like our list that's official now, about like this might be something we need to think about management, right? Because how did you feel about the difference between the first launch and the second launch?
It was a little easier because I had a better picture of what to expect.
So Kaleem thinks it's easier. I actually thought people seemed to struggle a little bit more in the second.
Coaching-wise, yeah, no.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
I was going to say the skill in the first launch was much more concrete for me, and so just having to explain it without delving into a lot of talking was really difficult. So I imagine.
Yeah, I appreciated the challenge of like boiling this one down. I could have gotten to this one easily by like rambling for 5 minutes, but to come up with a set of sentences that were discrete but model inferencing was a good push.
I think it was challenging to identify a misunderstanding. So the teacher doesn't understand like the idea of gathering details to make inferences. Is this the teacher isn't prepared? Is it like misunderstanding the launch? So I feel like some sort of like coaching structures that are like more formal where you do this and at least putting in a check-in first and practice and saying I'm going to come look for this really helps you to have a deep understanding as a coach for why are people struggling, not just like the fact that they are. Live coaching on something is effective for that moment, but it's not going to be like the last thing you have if they don't know why.
Perfect.
I think the difference between like the first and second one, it was easier. I like the second one better because it was easier for me to base it in literacy. I feel like in the zone can go from an air conditioner to I use like a softball where it's like a softball game where it's like making emphasis. I was like able to like give an example based on the book, and I don't think it's much other ways in life that you're truly making emphasis.
Okay.
My comment was related to that. I think for the second one, actually, we as a group kind of struggled more to base it on how does this impact you as a reader versus like, let me give a really cool real-life example of how inferences are used day to day, but the reading part is really important, and I think a pitfall when the topic gets more challenging.
Yeah. So my point here is that like there's a difference, right? And like you all have like been in schools, many of you have taught literacy, taught book clubs before, and this was still challenging for new teachers. This launch is going to come up like week 2 or week 3 of the unit. You're going to see that in the unit plan, and they're going to need coaching around it. So something that principals and APs are going to want to think about is what's the structure you're going to use to make sure that this launch, this 3 minutes of your class, is as purposeful as possible. Because if the launch isn't great, everything else that you go around it is going to be pretty challenging. And the elements you use for a launch are super important for your model. They're also the same elements you're going to use in guided reading and in conferencing. All right? So something to think about with your team. I want you to go ahead and independently reflect what's the commitment you're going to make as a coach around coaching the launches. A commitment might be like, how often are you going to observe? What are you going to do for planning for your teachers? Like, what are you going to do to support your teachers to have excellent launches? And everybody should be supporting teachers on excellent launches. about 10 more seconds. All right. So before we move into the next section, I just want to thank you guys. You guys have been awesome and super engaged. I know this is a long morning. We started off like straight through, and we haven't really had much time to get up and have breaks, but you guys have been excellent. The energy in the last round was awesome, so thank you. If you guys are doing that every day, truly we're going to make really significant gains with our kids in reading. This next section is about data gathering and tracking. I love data and everything data related. Unfortunately, we only get to spend about 10-15 minutes on this section. So go ahead, turn to the next page in your packet. The packet that starts off with the reading framework part. It looks like this. So before I go into that, why is it important that we track data for reading on a daily basis? Matt?
I think we measure a lot of inputs for reading. It's difficult to measure the outputs consistently. If I could give the SRI every week accurately, I would, but you cannot do that. And F&P takes a day, so it's just too much time testing. So I have to somehow measure inputs, and so a lot of those are books read, or how long I'm reading, whether I'm engaged when I'm reading, and all the things we'll get to in a moment. But I've got to measure the inputs so that I can get my best guess to the output, I think.
Mm-hmm.
On a baseline, like we track what's as a network, we track what's important to us, and if reading is as important to us as we like are saying that we're like committed to believing, we actually have to have like daily data tools that show our kids also like how invested we are in their growth and improvement.
I think just as important as giving data students where you over time, it's also important to encourage teachers to say like yesterday you read 15 pages, today you read 4, let's talk about why that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In other classes, we have exit tickets or some kind of product that you can give direct feedback to the students on, and so this is a way to, as long as we're co-collaborating with them, do that same process.
Last
An
one.
advisor is not going to be able to communicate effectively with parents about how their job is doing in the school if they don't have the information from the reading instructor to be able to present what's happening in the class.
Mm-hmm. We did not track data well for reading this year, like on the whole. There are teachers in our network who did a great job. There are school leaders and like coaches who did a great job pushing their people. But as a whole, we didn't like have like a method that we used. And because of that, a lot of new teachers just didn't know how to do it and therefore like didn't do it. And not out of any like malintent, but really just not knowing. So what I've done is kind of created like a version that I think is pretty simple that we can use to track data. And we're going to go through this, and then we're going to talk about like teacher ownership and then leader ownership over this. So go ahead, look at that first page. This is an example that all teachers will have on their clipboard. So every class you teach, so say I teach 2 cohorts of 5th grade reading, I would have 2 copies of this, 1 for each cohort. As you can see, I'm tracking the student name, the reading level, the type of reader, that's TOR, type of reader. Reading level is F&P or Lexile, depending on their grade level. Each week I'm tracking the number of books they've read in total. I'm writing the number of conferences I have planned. That's a decision that I'm making as a teacher with my school leader or coach. And then I'm writing the date of the conference. This is a super snapshot checklist. We're going to look at examples. Okay.
This would be literacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Advisor.
This is literacy teachers. Now you could also have advisors do that, which would be pretty awesome. But this is just literacy teachers on the whole. So let's look at an example. If you turn, well, first, let's look at the next page. So, second form of data, this is student by student. In the classroom, there's going to be a literacy binder. Will you write that up on the board? Things to manage. Each classroom has like a literacy, I think I called it like the independent reading binder. So every kid in that class, in your cohort, gets a page of that binder. Eventually they'll have pages upon pages. And so as you can see, we've got the scholar name, the type of reader, just like on that other checklist. Their favorite genre, favorite book. I probably should add their reading level, or beginning reading level. And then notes or noticings, like things that you see about that reader. And then you're marking down the dates of your conference, action steps, notes on progress, and follow-up.
Is action step student action step or teacher action step?
Student action step.
So this is what I'm bringing to the IR block when I'm having a conference with
And I would just leave it in the room. That's how I would do it as a teacher. So let's look at an example. Obviously, these are fake kids. Turn to the next page. We have a small class of 4 students: Ryan, York, Siobhan, Abigail, and Kevin. These are not their real reading levels. I did not ask them permission. Sorry if you guys are uncomfortable with this, but we're going to use yours as examples. This is something, obviously, I would want my whole roster on here, and I would fill this out with my coach at the beginning of the quarter, as soon as I get their FNP or Lexile. So 2 weeks into school, I know Ryan is at a Z, and I've given him a survey. I've watched him read in class, and I'm identifying what type of reader he is.
I'm sorry, what is UGUR?
Yeah. So this is from the Book Whisperer, and this is something we're just going to norm on. It's something that Donald Miller talks a lot about. We've got a developing reader, a dormant reader, or an underground reader. Underground. So developing reader is someone who's like still developing like the comprehension skills. Those are comprehension gaps. Typically, developing readers are on the lower scale of the FNP or Lexile scale. Sometimes they're low. They're a low reader because of other factors other than development. So it's not a comprehension gap. Sometimes it's one of the other factors. A dormant reader is someone who has not yet learned to love reading. So they're just like, I just think of them like not loving reading it. And then they will love it.
So it implies that they are not developing. They have the skill, they just don't like it.
Correct. Or sometimes they don't have the skill and they don't like it, but the key part of it is that they don't like it.
Right.
Okay? Underground readers are readers who actually love reading, or often are like reading like in like kind of like in secret is how I think about it. So those are people who might like opt out of class reading, but at home they devour novels. We see this a lot with high readers. They're going to be like your underground readers often because they don't want you to tell them what to read. They want to choose. These are kind of the 3 big categories. There might be other types of readers that like you might say, hey, I have a kid who's just like an upfront reader, not an underground reader. I just want to standardize these 3 things because these are the 3 biggest things that like teachers have to coach around.
Would you ask teachers to either make up an identifier or leave it blank?
I think you could just leave it blank. If you want at your school to like identify another category, you could. I'm just keeping it simple for the 3 things that like we really have to coach around the most in literacy classes. Okay. The next part is the books read to date. I put 8 weeks in there because on the 9th week, that's when you're giving your assessment. So you would obviously like look at a whole school roll-up or kid-by-kid roll-up of books read. Planned conferences. So this is something, again, right when you get your FNP level and you know like you're the type of reader, I'm going to sit down with my teacher. So I'm sitting down with Alex, who might be teaching this group of kids, and I'm going to say like, listen, Alex, I'm looking at Ryan. He's a Z, and he's an underground reader. He's reading a lot of books, so we're not going to conference with him every day. He doesn't need it, but we do want to make sure that his books are high quality. So let's do 1 per week for Ryan. I want you to put more time into Kevin because it looks like Kevin isn't progressing as fast as we want, and also,
and I'm also dormant.
Well, you're developing.
And dormant.
Yeah, and dormant. Yeah, you're kind of a lot of things. So.
How do you find the data for a close rate?
Yeah, there's a whole system on that. It's actually the back of this packet, but basically, let's not go into the system right now. We'll have time later to talk about literacy systems, it'll be pretty easy for you to figure that out.
It's going to be fast.
Yeah.
What do you suggest for new students? Would you prefer to push the date with your conference with your teachers back since you have a lot of information about students, or just like make a guess? Like it's day one or week one, and like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. For like fifth graders.
Or even new.
I would. Yeah, we have all the data, so I would start off right away. We have Lexile.
And we just guess on the type of reader.
Yeah, I would set a goal with your teachers. Say like by the end of week 2, you have to have given a survey or identified the type of reader, and like you have to have notes for me about why you picked that. So that's basically you're forcing people to like interact with the kids as readers. I'd want that to happen within 2 weeks because if they don't, it will never happen. It'll always be like kind of like I just like anecdotes about kids.
Do you typically actually do like a book shopping during a conference? Are you saying that, hey, this we just make like the interactive comment or make sure you have all the books? And would you as a teacher be like, hey, here's the series?
I might give them the series. I might put it on their desk during AMA. I would not use my time during literacy to book shop with kids because I think it's just like one of those things that's really fun, but not. It's something that you should be able to teach kids how to do, and they should do independently.
So we should see AMA teachers doing book shopping with the information they get from the different.
Yeah. Okay, so then I'm just having teachers write the date of the conference as they go. So this is something they keep on their clipboard for like the full quarter, right? And what's really great about this is they're going to come to meetings with you, right, their coach, and they're going to check in with you. And you're going to be able to look at this and say like, see how Ryan's doing, you know? And like last week we set a goal around kids reading X amount of books. Let's see how we're doing, like that type of thing. This allows you to have some data that we talked about that we didn't have this past year so that you can have a good kind of like image of like how is my school progressing and what do I need to do at each grade level. Okay? Go ahead.
One thing I was going to say too, the way you figure out what type of reader they are is also through conferences. So like, you could start with the roster and the Lexile or the F&P at the beginning of the year, and then say like, based on this kid's low F&P, you already need a conference now 4 times in the next 2 weeks, so the end of 2 weeks, tell me what type of reader.
Yeah. And the type of reader thing is, I think, just helpful to think about action steps. Because like if someone is a dormant reader and developing, I have to tackle the dormant thing first because they're not going to read. They're not going to do any of the action steps if they don't like reading. So I have to like solve the liking thing first, and then I have to solve the understanding piece second. So let's.
Is there a term for a kid who's none of those things? Is there a sort of reader that we're kind of shooting for? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Just a reader. A great reader.
VR.
So that's like a term your school could do, like a VR, a voracious reader. You could like check that off and they're good to go. The next page, an example for the IR binder. So again, teachers are going to fill out one of these for every kid. This is not meant to be a lot of paperwork. This is not meant to be like some kind of weird like system we have that's not helpful. It's meant to be helpful. I am envisioning teachers doing this for their kids, making this binder, and then each week taking it to you during their check-in so you can go through this. You should not go through kid by kid every single time, but what you should be doing is looking through subsets and getting like trends for you as a leader. What are my people focusing on? Is every action step the same for every child? Probably not smart, right? Am I seeing not enough check-ins for my most struggling readers? Like what's going on in class when I'm not there? And then therefore, after you see that data, you can then push around aspects of, like you can push your teachers in different ways. Go ahead.
Do you have any cautions around making this digital? Like, would you see any reason why it wouldn't make sense?
Yeah. I thought a lot about that. I personally would prefer it's not digital, and here's why. I think teachers get tied to their laptops pretty quickly, and it can become a little bit. It can feel a little bit more bureaucrat or like less personal if you're like checking in and typing in as a kid's conferencing with you. What they should be doing is writing in this as the kid's conferencing. I think that's a lot more like comfortable feeling for a kid. But if you feel like your teachers could do that, I think it's fine. It's up to you. It's meant to be helpful for you and your teachers.
Does you said this binder with these pages lives in the classroom, so advisors can look at it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an important point, actually.
Yeah. So this binder with the check-in action steps will be in the advisory in the classroom. So for lower middle school, the advisor will be able to look at this and say, like, that's what this kid is working on. So when I'm also checking in with them during AMA or helping them pick a book, I can see their favorite genre and their favorite book and what their reading teachers noticed about them.
Mm-hmm. And you could also have, advisors could write a line in, also checked in on 626 with Abigail and noted that she, had self-checked every few pages as well. Awesome job. So the reading teacher knows. But this is primarily for the literacy teacher so that we have evidence of conferences and we, understand how our conferences are going. What I don't want to have happen is we, put all this time into conferencing, but we don't have any idea of what's actually happening in the conference, right? And the other great thing about this is when parent-teacher conferences come around, you can use this to say, over the course of the last 9 weeks, we worked with your kids on these things. I just want to, I want to show you this, and let's talk about, how we can be more effective next time. What do you need from me? How can I better communicate? That's cool. This is something you'll want to think about, who's managing it, who's printing the sheets. Because you're going to go through these, a lot. By the end of the quarter, each kid will probably have, at least 4 or 5 sheets of paper behind them, right? All those types of things. How do you manage it? At the end of the quarter, teachers are going to put their master sheet, the one on the page before, in the binder, and then we're going to start over. So by the end of the year, you'll have, a lot of data on each kid. Cool.
Annie, as a leader who's trying to get a pulse check across all classes or something, is there some crafty, what do you look at, or what can you look at relatively quickly to assess, that teachers are doing what you want them to? It is not just, number of conferences necessarily.
Yeah, I'd look at books read first, and that would, lead me to, which classrooms to focus on first. And then I would always be skimming for my lowest readers and checking their data more specifically. Because that's the group that struggles the most with our growth. We saw that data as a state, and we know that internally. So I'm going to laser focus on that, all grades. I also might, have my, student supports team be hyper-focused on those as well and be doing, adding to this as well. So this is how I am thinking of it. So teachers, they're going to be daily conferencing with scholars. They're going to be tracking it on their trackers, the conferences. And then I said, print and keep a master copy on the clipboard. That way when you walk in, you can just see that data. You should go up and ask to look at that. And they're going to take detailed notes in the binder. Scholars, they're daily writing in their reading log. So we're still debating the version of that, if it's digital or not. But regardless, they have a similar template that they're using. You saw that in the vision to take notes on how they're doing. So there's student ownership there, which I think is really exciting. They're also going to write their action step that the teacher gives them. So this helps with being clear. If our teachers are not being clear with giving an action step or a thinking job for the kids, then the kids are going to really struggle with their reading logs. So that's something to coach around right away. And then leaders, you're going to utilize the IR tracker during your check-ins, and you're also going to utilize the IR binder. And sometimes you might not have time to go through the binder, but the habit of having them bring it and have it and update it matters. That says a lot about what you care about as a school leader.
So Annie, if teachers are conferring every day with kids, why do they need to do guided reading with them?
Because, guided reading is a more targeted approach, I'd say, to teaching kids reading skills, and you're going to actually get way more bang for your buck on guided reading. That's why I would do it. So let's do some quick data analysis practice here. So analyze the data above. What can you guess the different, I already told you what all this meant, so we're going to skip that question. Why do I have to do more conferences, or why do I have more conferences planned with Siobhan and Kevin?
Siobhan's not reading books, and Kevin's reading level is grade level.
Yeah. And that's like, for me, that's like a quick one that like once I get her hooked, especially at a Z, she's on an independent reading level, like well above it. She's on a 6th grade reading level, a Z. So I know as soon as I get her hooked, like she's good to go. Why is it important that I'm using the following data points: reading level, type of reader, and books read?
Because alone they don't illuminate really a scholar's engagement or ability or willingness to read, but together they sort of.
William, can you talk a little louder?
I'm sorry, I do that often. Alone, they don't give us any real insight into a scholar's engagement or reading level or number of books read, but together they sort of work in tandem to give us a clearer picture of where scholars are, and then also informs our action on how to move them.
Mm-hmm.
I think type of reader in particular gets at this idea of like root cause. Like it's very easy to look at Ryan and Siobhan and say like they're both level Z's. Let's do the safe intervention with those kids. But there's the type of reader in the books read actually tell you that there's something else going on there that we need to address in a different way. So it individualizes things for specific kids.
Mm-hmm. The last question is, who decides the number of conferences? That's you and your teachers together. Eventually, teachers should be able to totally do that on their own, but I'd like you to like coach them and guide them so that what isn't happening is we're all doing conferences with like Kevin all the time and not focusing on a Siobhan or an Abigail or a Ryan.
And so you would still say that Ryan should get a conference a week?
I would, yeah. I think it's important to check in with all your readers once per week. So I think we've done enough data analysis. This is just, again, like my big plug here is this is only as helpful as you make it important to your teachers. If you do not look at this, if you don't check in with teachers about it, they're not going to check in, they're not going to fill it out. And then they're going to tell you, when you go in, you're saying like, let's predict, I would have them do this, let's predict how our students are going to do on our next round of FNP and Lexile. They're not going to be able to tell you how your students do with any accurate data. If you do this well, you should know exactly what your FNP scores are going to be at the end of quarter 1 because you will know exactly what happened every single day to your readers.
And your teachers are going to expect you to collect it because Annie's going to tell them this is what's going to happen in the school. So they'll be pushing you too. So it won't be a surprise to them that this is what you're asking.
Okay, conferring with readers, yay! So conferencing, why conferences? So conferences are such an important part to any literacy program. They allow differentiated learning, which Brian, I think, talked about. He said like independent reading is such a great time to differentiate. This is one way we do it. They're going to push students to grow. And something that I know that all of us believe we could work on as a school, as a team of schools, they help you build relationships with your readers, and really with any scholar. So 3 really important reasons why we want to conference with kids every single day. So a quick model. Before I do that, I'm going to actually show you the parts of a key conference, or of a conference. So this is on your framework. You can go back to the first page if you want that. So how do you conference? First, you're going to go up to the student and you're going to either start with a quick retell. So that's like a quick retell or a quick whisper reading. A retell is a 1 to 2 sentence summary that you ask from your students. You're going to have to coach them around this so that they tell you where they're at in their independent reading book. The point of the retell is often you don't know their independent reading book because you haven't read all of them. That's why you start with a retell or a quick whisper read. That's like your data gathering. Then, once you have that done, and that should take no more than 30 seconds, you're going to notice what the student is struggling with, or you're going to already know their action step because you have your handy-dandy tracker, and you're going to continue to drive at that action step. Kids sometimes need multiple days on the same action step, and it's okay. So drive at that. You're going to coach student around the struggle with a quick model. Potentially this could be a question. And then you're going to name that as an action step. Again, sometimes the action step's the same though as the day before. And you're going to write this down because you don't want to forget what you told the student and you don't want to forget to follow up. We're not throwing action steps at kids in any random order. We're going to be strategic about them so they know the path we're going towards. Okay? The whole conference should be no more than 3 minutes. If you're doing like a longer than 3-minute conference, there's something that's happening where you're not being efficient enough at the conference. Then it's turning into like a chat about a book, or it's turning into like just shared reading. And not that that's important, but that's not getting at the point of the conference. The point of the conference is to data gather and give kids an action step that's more precise than the whole class action step. Okay?
What if you are conferencing with the kids that struggle, and in fact like a pretty enthusiastic? Sorry. What do you do if you're confronted with a kid during a conference that doesn't present with any struggle and is in fact a pretty enthusiastic reader? How do you make purpose of the conference?
Yeah. Push them. So there's always things that we can get better at. This is where I go to the more deeper content-based thinking jobs and action steps, which is like analyzing craft, analyze perspective, compare to previous books, like look at theme. This might be an ongoing action step for a really high reader for a long time, but they could collect notes on theme the entire book, and that would be an awesome action step for a high reader, right? It's really fun, and that's where differentiation comes into play. So modeling conference, kind of awkward and hard. We're going to start with, I need someone to volunteer to be the student. Yay, thanks, Ryan. So Ryan, will you just give me this? If I were conferencing, I'd be whispering, but Ryan, why don't you give me a quick summary of your independent reading book?
So right now I'm learning about how the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed and why that inspired Abraham Lincoln to run for president.
Mm-hmm. And what are you learning so far about how it inspired Abraham Lincoln to run for president?
He was sort of under this mindset initially that the country was going to be heading in a direction he thought was right. When he realized it wasn't, he realized he needed to take action and be responsible for that change.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I'm noticing that you're understanding the big picture of what's going on in the book. Mm-hmm. I want you, as you continue to read, to find evidence and details that prove, like, you understand what Abraham Lincoln was. What was it again?
Why he was inspired to run for president.
There you go. That's the one. And then I'm going to write it down, and then I'm going to move on. Okay? So I asked him for a retell. It's pretty high level. He obviously was understanding his book. I'm asking him to gather evidence, and then I'm going to move on to the next kid. Super quick.
Procedurally, like for follow-up, how will you know that he's gathering evidence? Like, I noticed on one of these, it was like on a post-it note or something.
Yeah.
Would you like tell the kid explicitly
Yeah.
where and how?
Yeah, and we're teaching teachers, that's part of and kids, that's in the unit plan, to teach them how to take notes in their book. So that's something that hopefully would be a routine. For older kids, you might say a notebook might be more for high school. But I would tell them explicitly to do that. Cool? If I was going to have Ryan instead do a reading to me, I would actually have him open up his book and whisper read. I would prefer to do the reading with lower readers, personally, because I'm looking for fluency and things like that. I'm going to only have them read a couple sentences, max a paragraph. Again, this isn't shared reading time. And I'm going to give him that quick feedback. So say he's struggling with fluency in a sentence, I might say, Ryan, I noticed that you don't pause in between your sentences. Pausing is really important because it helps us distinguish between the different ideas. Every time you see a period, I want you to tap twice in your head so you can have a pause and separate your sentences. All right? I want you to write that down on a Post-it note so you remember that. And in your head, you're tapping twice. Keep going. Something like that.
They have a reader's notebook.
Yes, he would write in his reader's notebook. You're correct. Yep.
I'm curious from the teacher's perspective if there's a bank of strategies that they will learn during PD.
Yeah.
that they can go to. And I'm wondering also specifically if that includes like investment, because I know there was a piece of that training last year, and I have a hunch that'll be a lot of the first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. I have it in like 3 different documents currently, but I'll put it all together. Cool.
From a teacher's perspective, how would you describe to them the rationale of having a whole class focus and these individualized focuses at the same time?
What do you guys think? What would you say?
So just like as a school, we have a focus on X, but you as a developing teacher have also a focus on different.
Then how would a student how would you message that to students? Because I can see a student being like, am I supposed to be doing this or am I supposed to be doing
Yeah, if your goal is to stay in the zone, but you're also tapping every sense, like how do you like deal with conflicting priorities?
I think it's just like all readers are different, and like these are small tidbits. It's less, to me, it's less about like, maybe that is a distracting example. It's less about giving them something else to do. It's more about like teaching them something very small that they, like a habit. So like the habit I was trying to get at is pausing in between your sentences. I gave him, because I often like to do this, something observable for me, but it's more important that he just like pauses in his sentences. Okay? Is that
And that leads to probably the bigger goal of the class.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I've never had kids like be like confused at what they're like. They'll like implement these very quickly if you're clear with them.
The narration is like, this is our class goal. The feedback I'm giving you is like a piece of like a skill or a habit that's going to help you get there.
Mhm. Yeah. Cool.
Especially just like you're gonna keep like if you're not doing the pauses in the sentences right, next time Amy comes around, like that sticks with you. Like you're not gonna move on until like it kind of like masters this conference goal, and so it'll feel more sustained.
Mhm.
You're also used to that in elementary school. Like they did guided, ideally, if they would have done guided reading groups if they were in the zone while I was in elementary school, and also like their teacher may have taught them what the setting of the story is that day. Then when they were in their small group, they may have focused on like character motivations if they were like a high group and something like that. Like hopefully they like see themselves as
Mhm.
I think you could also make the argument that just not to overcomplicate things, like because then your individual content is supposed to be quick, but like if Ryan's not stopping between his sentences, there's no way he's in the zone because he's not like actually retaining anything, and so like making those connections for people wherever possible, I think is really powerful. So I think you already said it right, but like you're all driving towards one common thing, but each of you might get different strategies to get there.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And I do think there are some children, maybe one per class, who might just like this, even though we all believe that it's like you're able to do both of these things at once, who you might need to say, Ryan, I know we talked about getting in the zone. I want you laser focused on sentences. We're going to reflect on that later. Instead of reflecting on that, I want you to reflect on how you did with your sentences.
And I think that's the piece of like ownership, like student ownership of their data, of like, hey, like we've seen the data, so this is where you are, and like we're going to get you.
Yep. Okay. So some things that I noticed teachers struggle with: timing. We're often just way too long at each conference because we want to make sure that we can get to a lot of kids. Often we don't name an action step or a teaching point clearly. We forget the skills we use in our lunch when we're conferencing. They're often the same. We didn't coach around the teaching point. We didn't use the text. So, for instance, I should probably, if I were conferencing with Ryan, I should have him have the text out, and I might say let's find one right now, a detail that proves that Abraham Lincoln was preparing to be president. It's often just too much teacher talk, and then often data isn't written down. So those are things I'm going to look for as I'm observing my teachers do conferences. So we'll see how this works. We're going to do some practice on executing a conference. We're going to have a student. One of you is a student. They're going to be struggling with the same skill. We're just doing this because I just don't want it to be a hunt for some skill that kids are fake children are struggling with. So everybody's just going to struggle with gathering details to make an inference. We've already practiced that earlier today, so you have an idea of what that is if you're not a reading teacher. Teachers are going to target that skill. And then your coach, you're going to look for high leverage feedback on how to get better at conferencing. So coaches should probably be coaching around these things. And teachers, you're going to want to think through the conference in this framework.
So if I'm the student in a role play, when I'm asked about what I'm reading, I want to do something that's showing that I'm not gathering details to make it.
Yeah, and honestly, I would just say, like, let's just all assume that the student's struggling with it, so you can just start, like, teacher talk, go right into the conference. So you don't have to act, like, too much as a student.
So starting step 3 here.
Yeah, let's start at step 3. That's probably the best way to do this. All right, so let's stand up.
Let's learn our content and do the track record.
Oh, yes. Lemon, can you tell us what we're coaching around, what we're conferencing with students about?